Alright guys, so it is building shopping time, and you know exactly what that means. It is time for you to get out of your head, get out of the worries, all the unknown, whether you're thinking about what is the right building for your childcare program. So today in this video, I am going to give you 5 things that you should consider when you are shopping for your building, whether you are considering to lease it, get a mortgage, or any of that great good stuff in between. You ready? Let's dive in. Alright guys, so tip number 1 when you are shopping for your childcare program, whether you are doing group or center, is going to be location. Okay, yes, location. It's a super big deal when you are making this decision. Why? Because this is a commitment. So you really want to make sure that you identify areas of need in your community. So when you are looking for location, you want to look at things that are considered to be where other schools are, whether they're elementary schools, whether they're middle schools, high schools. People bring your children there. So you want to make sure that your location is a big deal and that you are near somewhere that's busy. You're near somewhere that has transportation, whether it's bus, subway. You want to be near places because that makes you more visible. And the more visible that you are to other customers and consumers, the easier it is for your marketing, the less you have to spend on money, and the better relationships that you can build with people in your direct community you're going to be servicing. And tip number 2 is going to be square footage. We cannot get around this, okay? So as a small base childcare provider, that's what I love to call us, we have 2 location sites, and so one of our buildings is zoned and licensed for 20 children, and one of our other buildings is zoned and licensed for 44 children. And so obviously that's a really big difference. It wasn't always that way, but when we first got our buildings, one was for 20 and one was for 28. So you clearly can see we've expanded since then. But one of the things I want to talk about when you think about square footage is going to be how many children can I get in this space, okay? Especially when you're shopping for a building, I always give this as a pro tip, and I always tell this to all of my students that is in the Child Care Startup University course, and I always tell this to all of my clients to make sure that when you're looking for that square footage, you know your regulations, right? So in our state where we're located at, every single age group has a different square footage. So if you're caring for infants, that's a different square footage. If you're caring for toddlers or preschoolers or school agers, that's a different square footage. So you want to make sure you know what your particular state's square footage requirement is, and then take that number and divide it. Okay, you also want to make sure as you're thinking of square footage, if your building that you're looking at was already an existing daycare, you want to get that paperwork, and they love to call it, what is it called? A certificate of occupancy. That is what it's called in most states. And the certificate of occupancy tells you exactly how many children are allowed to be in this building. It's like a club, right? When you go to a club or you get on the elevator, it's a maximum number, and that is exactly what you want. You don't want to get nothing verbal that this is what the owner said. No, you want to see it in black and white, clearing paper, because that is what you're going to go off of when you're thinking about budgeting and how much you can afford. Tip number 3, guys, is going to be know your demographics. What type of children are you going to be servicing? What type of clients are you going to be attracting? What is in your community, okay? And this is something that's super big and super pivotal as you are looking to grow and start your childcare program. You want to know your demographics, right? You want to know, are you in an urban community? Are you in a more suburban community? What is the income that's coming in this community? Why? Because that makes a major difference on the type of clientele you're going to be going in. So how do you do that? Go out into your community, do a pull-up, okay? That's what I love to call it. Go to other childcare programs, call, get price points so you can exactly know what type of families and clientele you're going to be servicing. Here's a great example. If you guys are on this channel, you're going to see that I love to give examples in all of my videos. Why? Because that's how I operate. I'm a visual person, and more importantly, that's how I learn best, okay? So at one of my childcare programs, we are more off in the back in a tuck. We're not on the main strip, right? So I know that in that demographic area, there's not a lot of working families. So we get a lot of like subsidized families or parents who may be on like welfare to work programs. So therefore I know that that's the demographic, that's the area that I'm servicing, right? Whereas though at my other childcare program, those parents in that community average income is at a different pay rate. So I know that that's the type of demographics of families that I'm going to be servicing. So it's two separate different things. You want to know what age groups and what the demographic is like of the parents and the families that you're servicing, and what that income is like. You know why? Because that's going to play a major role when you are thinking about setting your price points. That's going to be a major role when you are considering to be eligible for grants and programs and loans and things of that nature. So make sure you do your due diligence in knowing what is the demographics of folks you're going to be servicing. Okay, guys? Tip number 3 is going to be knowing when to buy and knowing when not to buy, okay? This is something that always holds people back. They always say, like, a lot of my clients and students will be like, oh, Ms. I think I see a building, but I don't know if I actually want to, like, buy the building. I don't have enough money to, you know, purchase a building. I'm not eligible for a loan. My credit score is nowhere near where I need it to be. And I always tell them, you have to determine whether you're going to buy a building or whether you're going to lease a building. Neither one is more better than the other, but I always preach out of, especially to everyone in our membership program, that ownership is key, right? So obviously at one point in time, we have 4 daycare programs. 2 of them were leased and 2 of them were owned. So I always give you guys a rule of thumb. If you're owning a building, that's super great. Why? Because you can never take a L. If you own a building and it doesn't work out, you can lease it to someone else, or you can lease it in a different industry, but you have that ownership and you've been building equity in that building. Okay? But that'll definitely be something that I talk about in a later video that I share with you guys. If you're thinking about leasing, which most people go down that lane, is leasing the building, make sure that you are looking at the actual lease. Make sure that it meets your needs. Make sure that it identifies what you're responsible for. And make sure you, most importantly, try to get some free months, okay? And this is something that I really dive deep in our Child Care Startup University course, where I teach all about shopping for buildings, negotiating leases, all of that great good stuff. Why? Because I've been in a lease before where I've had to break it because I wasn't looking and I wasn't paying attention to the fine print. So that's why I always love to share with you guys. Make sure you look at those leases. Try to negotiate some money down. Try to get some free months. Why? Because really the ball is in your court, you know? People always think it's the opposite way around, but me as an owner of buildings, I want for someone to come into my building new, you know? I want to be able to, you know, get that first month, last month security, because you never know what's going on the landlord side, okay? So your first building that you look at is not always the building, okay? So that's something I always just want to put it as a disclaimer out there. But making sure that you determine whether to buy or not to buy is super, super important. And you have to go up, what are your needs? We started as a family-based childcare program where we were in our home. And a lot of people think they're like, oh, I don't want to be in my home, but it's great. Why? Because you already still got to pay the same mortgage, the same utilities, the same bills, the same internet. All those things you still have to pay, and your budget and your finances may not be there yet, realistically speaking, to even afford a lease. Because a lease is just like an apartment lease. They don't care whether you got the money. They don't care whether you open, whether you did not open, whether you open and you still don't got no kids. The landlord still wants their money the first or whatever day of the month that you guys have agreed upon. Okay? So making sure that you can afford whether to lease or not to lease, or buy or not to buy. Okay? My tip number 5 is going to be know your state's regulations, okay? And the reason why I say that is because so many times I see many of my clients that have already purchased buildings, and one of the things they do is they purchase this big building and it doesn't have a backyard, right? And a part of the state licensing in their state or any state is that they have a place of gross motor, they have a place to play. And many times us as owners don't factor in that this is not a mixed use space that they can work in. If it's a designated play, it's a designated play. And so you may have square footage, but you have this indoor play space. How is that going to help you? That's going to potentially take away from your actual number on your actual license of compliance. So you want to make sure that you know your state's regulations. You know, do they need a separate play space? Do they need an outdoor space? Is it required? Do they need an indoor play space? You want to consider and know those things when you're thinking about getting that building, okay? And one of the most important things that I can share with you guys, building shopping is fun. We all love it. It's like, yes, I'm here, I've made it. But you really, really want to make sure that you don't lock yourself into something that's not a great fit for you. So my bonus tip is going to be, make sure that you go into that community during the day And also make sure that you visit that community in the evening, okay? Make sure that you check it out, get a feel for it, because I know that in my community in the wintertime, it's totally different than when I'm in my community in the summertime, okay? So you really, really want to get a feel. It's like when you're buying a home. Yes, the home look great, but you should go visit that neighborhood. Go to that corner store. Go to that, supermarket. Get a feel like, is this where you want to be? Because sometimes we get, I call it daycare shopping happy, and sometimes we get daycare shopping happy, and what we forget is the logistics, the numbers, and what's reality. And so when you think of those things, you want to make sure that you really visit and you get a feel for the overall, because this is where you're going to be. It's like a car, right? When you know, but you cannot ignore the numbers. You cannot ignore the square footage. You cannot ignore your budget, because that's how we'll go into like bad debt and really be just so burnt out you're forced to close this down because you can't even afford it at this point. But you really, really want to make sure that you're taking all of these steps into consideration, and more importantly, doing your due diligence of research and homework, okay? So if you have liked this information, make sure that you head over to the www.educatedminds University, and you can always check out our free webinar in this video, or you can always check out our Child Care Startup University course. Until next time.